Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brenniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. I'm starting a little series of videos that will appear on Thursdays during March of 2026 on what I'm hearing from younger generations as I talk with them. I have always worked with people in their teens and their 20s, uh, uh, and those people in their teens and their 20s are in different generations. I mean, I'm going back to the 1970s when I began to do that kind of work. And so I've been listening to young people for a very long time. And I have a different attitude towards them than many of my contemporaries in my age group. What I hear from my age group is that young people today are poorly prepared to work. They don't have skills. They don't have character. Uh, they don't know how to work hard. They don't know how to take initiative. All these are criticisms that I hear from them. I had a conversation with a woman who had just closed her restaurant after, I think, 25 or 30 years. And her complaint was she couldn't find good people to work for her. And she was directly talking about the young men and women that were available in her community to come serve as waitresses and waiters and kitchen staff and that sort of thing. And I said to her, well, whose responsibility is it to develop those people? Why isn't it you? And she didn't have an answer to that. So there's this expectation that people will go through the system of education in our world and they'll be prepared to do anything and everything. And that's just certainly not true. And it wasn't true when I was coming along. It's never been true. And yet, my generation seems to have this belief that everybody should be like them as they were as mature adults. Well, it doesn't really work that way. And what I've discovered in my work is that people go through high school, they go through college, they get a job, and they may work in that job for 20 years, and then they hit some kind of obstacle or they hit a wall or some moment of transition descends upon them and they have to start all over. And this typically is happening in their 40s. It happened to me. I started my consulting practice when I was 42 years old. And it was the best thing I could have done. It wasn't that what I had done prior to that was a waste of time because it prepared me for what I was going to do. But my generation doesn't look at things like that, and they should be. They should look at young people as potential people, people with potential who are undeveloped and need development. And so if you really care about younger generations, then you're going to do something to develop their leadership capacities, their work capacities. And it doesn't start when they finish college. It starts while they're in school. And so this is something I see that must be done in collaboration with school systems and with parents, because the parents, feel the burden as well of how do I prepare my child to function well in the world that exists today? Well, I believe the place to start with this is to talk to younger people, high school kids, college kids, people in their 20s, people in their 30s. And I think we should be talking to them in such a way that we're not simply preparing to say what we think they should hear from us. Because I think that's what they have found from us, is that we constantly have a message. We constantly have a set of expectations. We constantly have uh, a set of principles that we are placing on them, and what they do not, that what they have not received is why these matter. There's just they're they are treated like they are employees in an old-fashioned business where the employees are simply under the authority of the person who's the boss. It's a master slave kind of relationship. And that is not a, a relationship that's going to work in our time or in the future. We have to be much more collaborative. So we need to listen to one another. So my generation needs to say, okay, I'm going to stop trying to tell people what I think they should know, and I'm going to start listening. And I'm going to intentionally listen. And I'm going to try to figure out how I'm going to listen to younger people. Now, maybe you have uh, children that are under 40, or maybe you have grandchildren that are still in school or in college, or maybe they're out of college now. But you have people in your life, and you don't really know what they're thinking of you. That's a conversation I will have in another video, how families talk to each other. But that's for another video. But you don't really know what your children and your grandchildren and maybe even your grandchildren are thinking of you, because you have not placed yourself in a position where you can have that kind of honest conversation, where they hear you speaking to them about not what they should do and how they should approach finding a job or whatever it may be, but just listening. So what is it you're interested in? And how did you come to have this sense of what you want to do with your life? And how can I help you find a way to realize that future that you seem to desire? I had lunch the other day with a friend, and he has two sons that are in college. And I offered to him, I said, listen, I know that, raising college age children is not the easiest thing in the world. I said, so if I can help you by just having a relationship with your sons, and I would just listen and say, oh, have you thought about this? Help them learn how to think through the process of developing their lives so that when they discover what it is they really want to do, that the pathway forward for them is really clear. That's really what I find a lot of young people need. Now, one of the things that I am doing in this whole process of talking and listening and being concerned for younger generations is that I'm writing a novel. I've never written a novel. I started this back in the fall. The first draft is about 25,000 words, moving to probably 100,000 before I'm done. It's been a lot of fun. But let me tell you what I'm writing about. I'm writing about a young man at the point when the most of the story is taking place. He is 18 years old. But when the story starts, he is 3, and he is the sixth of 6 children. And at the age of 3, his parents are killed in a plane crash. And his grandparents take the 6 children in. And the next youngest of the siblings is 6 years older than him. So he really doesn't, at 3, he's not really cognitively that developed to be able to be equal in many ways to his siblings. The siblings look upon him as the baby or the child or the toddler of the family, but they're moving into they're moving into high school and into college, and they're moving into their careers, as he's simply getting to the age of 10. And so he is um, very much developed by his grandfather, because his grandfather understands and sees what's going on, and they live on a farm, and his grandfather has kind of trained him to think. His grandfather was in the military, and he's trained him to think kind of like a military person. Very, very reality based, very clear planning. Um, and he goes off to college. And so, like many of your children and my children, they go off to college and they hear things that they've never heard before. And they're provided opportunities to be exposed to ideas and situations which challenge their values and challenge their intellectual formation and challenge their perception of who they are as individuals. And this happens to this young man. And he comes home, and we'll go into the what it is that challenged him, but he comes home and at the end of the first semester of his first year in college at the university, he decides that he's not in a position to benefit from a college education. He has many questions, not only about his life, but also about his family, and particularly about the loss of his parents. And he doesn't understand who they are and what the effect of their being missing from his life for 15 years means. And so he goes off on a venture, an adventure, a journey of discovery to find out who his parents are and who he is. And this is the story. This is the beginning of this story. I won't tell you any more because I want you to read this book, and it'll come out in serial form. And its title is Answers to Questions Never Asked. So I'm writing this story. I had begun this story back in the fall, and I was in Cody, Wyoming, where I have spent a lot of time over the last 3 years. And I walk into the bar at the hotel where I'm staying, and I sit down. There's a young man sitting there, and we start talking. And I say, "So what do you do?" He says, "Well, I have a construction business." And he tells me about his family, and he says he is currently building a house for his father. I said, "That's very interesting." So let me tell you about the book I'm writing. And I tell him about this boy coming to this juncture where he says, "I'm not going to gain anything from college by continuing this. I have to go do something. I have to leave. I have to disappear. I have to go discover who I am." And this young man, who's 25 years old, looks at me and he says, "That's really interesting." And I say, "Why?" He says, "As soon as I finish building this house, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave town here. I don't know where I'm going, but I need to go find out what I'm really interested in and really what I want to do with my life. And I know I can't find it by still doing what I've been doing for the last several years." So here is a real life story that matches the story that is conjured up in my own head. What I'm saying to you is that we're at a point in time where young people are in a very deep um, time of questioning everything. And if my generation is constantly, or the other generations that are older are constantly tossing expectations and thoughts and answers to them, they're never going to reach that point of understanding of how they will be the leaders of the world after we're gone. And that's my concern. I want to help these young men and women develop, but I don't want to direct their development. I want to be an assistant to them. I want to be in mutual communication with them and mutual uh, influence with them. I want them to influence me as much as I influence them. I want to have that kind of a relationship with these younger people, particularly Gen Z and Gen Alpha, which is the generation that's now in high school. And so this is where we are. I think it's time that my generation not so much give up whatever power or whatever authority it has. I don't think it's really about that. I think it's time for us to become humble and listen. And if you have it within yourself to become a more humble, dignified, caring person, where you honor young people as the future and worthy of honor because they are young men and women who are growing up in a very, very challenging time, far more challenging than what I had to go through. And I think if we honor them with our love, our concern, our care, and our ability to listen to them and ask them questions about what is it that you really are interested in? What is it that you really have questions about? And what do you think I should think differently about the world that we live in? That to me is what each of us should be doing. And it's only the start of how we build relationships with these younger generations so that we'll be their champions. We'll stand on the sidelines as they're out there on the field, and we can say, "Yeah, look at them go." And that's my hope. So I thank you for watching. The next the next the next one of these videos will come out next week, and I want to talk about these questions and the answers that seem to be at the center of a lot of the conflict that exists between our generations. So stay tuned. Check back in next Thursday, and we will have another video here in Listening to Younger Generations, the series. And I thank you for watching the Eddie Network podcast, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.